All right, welcome back to math today. We are chugging along learning about decimals. Yesterday may have overwhelmed you because it was the first time really working on decimals, but don't be too worried. Today we will kind of straighten some of that out. So first of all, up here at the top, I have a decimal number line. So I kind of showed you one yesterday, but I was in too big of a rush, trying to get too far ahead of ourselves. So we're going to slow down today and do a number line first, okay? So on your whiteboards, draw your line. Please keep up with me so I don't have to wait too long. And we are basically going to draw part of the number line we see up here, but we're only going to go up to number 1. So we're going to put a 0 here, a 1 up here, and we are going to label our number line with tenths. Okay, we all know how to do that with fractions. Go ahead, go up from 1/10 all the way to 9/10. Okay, so if you want to find your midpoint first, that'd be 5/10. And I know that one whole thing is the same as 10/10, right? We know that. I will give you a minute to get that finished. About 10 more seconds, we should all be ready.
10, that's funny, 10.
Yeah, today, most things we're doing today revolve around the numbers 10 or 100. Okay, so here is the new stuff we're learning. When I have 1/10 as a fraction, I can also write 1/10 as a decimal. Does anybody remember yesterday when we want to write 1/10 as a decimal? Remember our little chart? You don't have to draw this if you don't want. Okay, we got our decimal point place. This is my ones place. Then I've got a tenths. Remember, we got to do the th sound. And then my hundredths, which is my least favorite one to say. Okay, how do I show as a decimal 1/10? Cadence?
100.
How would I write 1/10 up there? Where would I put my 1?
0, 1, 0.
So this would be a 0, right, because we don't have any 1s. How many tenths do I have, Cadence?
1.
1. Can I just put a 1 above my 10th? Is that as easy as that really is? It really is. So above your 1/10 right here, everyone should be paying close attention. We are going to put 0.1, which we read as 1/10. So it does kind of get weird sometimes, because if I say 1/10 from now on, you won't necessarily know if I'm referring to the fraction or the decimal. Do they mean the same thing? Mm-hmm. They do. They're equivalent. So what about 2/10? Any guesses how I write that, Hayden?
0.2, and then I got the 3 and the 4 and the 5.
Okay. Well, let's try one of these way down here, and then I think you guys can fill the rest in. What about 8/10? How would I write 8/10 as a decimal? Abby?
1.8.
0.8.
Not in 0.
That's what I knew you meant. All right, so the rest of you, go ahead, label the rest. When you're done, check up here, make sure you're right. You should be. You're really just putting 0 point whatever amount you have over 10. When I get to 9/10, I'm about to move up to one whole thing. It would just be 1.0. I have one whole thing with nothing left over. I will give everyone about 10 more seconds to try to finish writing this down.
This is mine.
Okay, now the next step is where I'm going to tell you how the hundredths come in. So I really need you to make sure you understand the tenths first. Any questions? There cannot be a question too silly or too simple to ask, because if you've got it, I bet you someone else in the class has it too. Does everyone understand how fractions of tenths equal the decimals of tenths?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, I'm going to switch colors. When we talk about hundredths, are hundredths bigger than or smaller than a tenth?
Small.
Cadence?
Smaller.
Much, much smaller. So remember, if I have 1/10, that's 1 out of 10 things. If I have 1/100th, that's 1 out of 100 things. My pieces are tiny. We are going to, on the same number line, mark 1/100th. Okay? Do you think it's going to be really close to the 0?
No.
It's almost on the 0. Okay? So everyone get ready. As close as you can. Actually, between 0 and 1/10th, I could make 10 marks. Okay, some of you in the back aren't listening very well. Make sure we're listening. So, I know it's going to be hard for you. We're going to only do one space, okay? So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Tiny, right? I'm not going to make you do your whole number line. Do it in one spot so we can think this through. So, between each 10th, I've got 10 of these little lines, right? So if I went my entire number line, would I have 100 tiny spaces?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So those are our hundredths. All right? So I am going to draw an arrow up because it's so tiny I can't even mark it in here. This is 1/100th. And now we're going to write that as a decimal. Okay? Everyone should still be writing with me. If you're not participating, you're not learning.
That's not a
All right, now let's think about this chart. I'm going to get rid of this. If I only have 1/100th, can I put any value in my tenths place? Raise your hand to answer. Noah?
Yes, you can put 1.
I have a tenth?
No.
No, I haven't made it up to the 10th yet, right? So what has to go here?
A 0.
A 0. Now, how many hundredths do I have? 1.
0 100ths.
Okay, so make sure we're listening very, very carefully. When I have 1/100th right here, see that spot, Angie? Have I gotten to a 10th yet? Is it smaller than a 10th? Yeah. So if I'm not to 1/10th, I have to put a 0 in my tenths place. That's just how that one works. What about, okay, let's do another one. What if I had 5/100ths? Okay, try to write that down. I'm only making you do this tiny bit, but everyone needs to keep working. Oh, I forgot to write this. As a decimal. So now we have 5/100ths. So now let's think about how I can write 5/100ths as a decimal. Okay, so again, let's think about our fraction. Do I have 1/10th yet? Am I up to 1/10th, Hayden?
No.
No, not quite. So what do I have to put in my tenths place, Abby?
A 0.
A 0. Now, how many hundredths do I have in this fraction? 5/100ths. I kind of said the answer, but there's no way around it. Cadence? 5. So I have 5 in my hundredths place. Okay, now let me walk you up a little bit further so you see what happens. The only time we put a 0 here is when I'm in between 0 and 1/10th. Because once I get to 1/10th, do I always at least have 1 I can put in my tenths place? Okay, let's just imagine now, we don't have to draw it on, we'll just draw a line up here. My fraction, let's say it is 32/100ths. I am not going to make you write out 100 little tiny marks here, but we're going to pretend we did. 32/100ths is about right here, if I count it over all the way. So if we want to write 32/100ths of a fraction, let's look at how this is going to be different.
Oh.
Okay, this time, the first thing I always think, do I have tenths? Well, I have 32/100ths. Do I have a number in my tenths place, Hayden?
Yes, and it would be 30, so 0.32.
I have 3 in my tenths place, 2 in my hundredths place, so 32.
How did you know 32 would be like in the 32?
Well, we could have drawn out our entire number line. So if we had done that, we knew this is 1/100th, 2/100th, 3/100ths, all the way up. This is 10/100ths. This would be 20/100ths, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. I could go all the way up. I didn't want to make you do all of that. So if we had counted all those marks and got to 32/100ths, I was just saying that's the fraction I picked. All right. So when do we have to put a 0 in the tenths place? When we're between which numbers? Abby?
0 to 100.
Just when we're down here, right? if I have at least 1/10 or bigger, I always will have a number in this place. All right, Chloe, question. That's all right. We're still learning. Okay, so now we are going to look back at the book. But before we did that, I wanted you to see this, okay? I wanted you to make sure you understood how the fractions and decimals at least line up on a number line together. So hopefully this will help the lesson make more sense. So we need to now turn to page 238, and we're going to start practicing some more. So get that in front of you, friends at home and in class. You can set your whiteboards to the side. And I really quickly have to go get my screen switched. So I will be right back. Okay, so you should be looking at page 238 in your instruction book. And we're just first going to look at the book showing us how to model something out. So this is just listening. So your ears, eyes have to be up here for you to understand this. Does someone want to read me this little thing about Eli? Zoe?
Eli collects sports cards. He says...
So we read that 5/100ths.
500 of his cards are baseball players. What fraction of his cards are baseball players?
Okay. Now we know this is 5/100ths. Okay? Now if we just say that number, anyone want to guess how that would look as a fraction? 5/100ths? I'm not trying to be tricky right now. It really is easy. Liam?
Like, it would be like 100 and then like 5 filled in.
Yeah, 5/100, right? So that really is what they're saying. And that is the point of this whole question, what they want us to answer. But I only have 5/100ths. All right, so they're asking what fraction of the cards. So look how they went through all this to make sense of it. All right, we have this 100 model, right? If I have 5/100ths, could I color in 5 out of 100 things? Yes, I could. Why do we not like solving math using this model that much, Josiah?
It takes forever to draw.
It does. And are we very accurate when we draw them?
No.
No. So it's really kind of a hard way to do it. But you can see, if I shade it in 5, that this shows 5 out of 100. All right, now here's this chart. This is what you should be getting familiar with, right? We just looked at this morning. I don't have any ones because there's no whole thing filled in. Here's my decimal point. Do I have any tenths?
No.
Okay, this is what we just talked about, the number line.
Yeah.
How do I know there's no tenths? Because there's not. Noah?
Because there's not a thing in the other thing. It's a 0 in the other column.
Right, they put a 0 in the tenths place, which means there are none. Angie?
I think when they mean like tenths, I think they mean there's not like a whole row of tenths.
You got it, right? That's a good point. If we had to have a tenth or a digit in that tenths place, Angie, you're right. We would have to have at least one whole column shaded, right? Otherwise, we don't have a tenth. So instead of having 10, we've only got 5. All right, so that's why there's a 0 in the tenths place. And they put 5 in the hundredths because there are 5. Any questions on this part? Okay. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. Nope, we're going to go to the next page. All right, pencils ready? I've got my marker ready. Number 8. How can the model help you write the fraction equivalent to 5/100ths? We just talked about it. What do you guys think? How did the model help? Abby?
The model would help like because
You can always bounce it on if you want to bounce it out, if you've lost your thoughts.
So basically what Angie said, if there's tens, an entire column would be filled, and if there's not, an entire column wouldn't.
Excellent. I like that. You guys are all kind of working together, using your ideas together. So how can the model help you write the fraction? I'm going to say we know we don't have any tenths because we don't have a full column of 10 shaded. And remember, it's not tens, it's tenths. We'll get used to it. If you say tens, that means tens place, which is much bigger. We know we don't have any tenths. We can do B/C because we didn't see an entire column shaded on the model. So I'm going to say so. So we had no tenths. I really like how Angie said that. If you don't see a whole column shaded, there's no tenth, right?
Do the ones matter in the column?
That's also a good question. So they always have the ones place, then the decimal, then the tenths, then the hundreds. Sometimes in decimals you will have something in the ones place. Like what if I had $1.10? Would this be in the ones place? Mm-hmm. So I could even have like a tens place, right? I could say I have $21.10. But we don't want to get too complicated too fast. So for now, we just think about the ones place, our decimal, our tenths, and our hundredths. All right, number 9. How can the place value chart help you write a fraction equivalent to 0.05 or 5 hundredths? Place value chart is this thing that Andrew just said, where we have the decimal point, the ones, the tenths, and the hundredths. I spelled that wrong. It's okay.
You don't like saying that word.
I don't. All right. So how does this chart help us figure out how to write a fraction equivalent to 0.05 or 5 hundredths? I'll let everyone think a minute. How did that help us? Josiah?
It says 5, it says 5 100ths, basically, if you read it.
Yeah, when we look,
Away.
the 5 is on the hundredths column,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's nothing in the
I
tenths.
also have a question.
Okay.
Do we have a test on this today?
Not today, no. So I like what Josiah said. The 5 is literally in the hundredth spot. So if you just read it, does it tell you what place it's in? All right. So we can say if you read the chart, you can see the place value of each digit. All right, what if a problem doesn't make the chart for you? Could you always draw one to the side and fill it in? Yeah. So think of this chart as a tool for you. You can always draw one if you need to help make sense of something. And honestly, that's a little easier to draw than a 100 grid, right? That's kind of a pain. All right, number 10. We need to use words to describe the fraction of Eli's cards that are baseball cards. Okay, and our fraction, we already know what it is. It's 5 hundredths. So how do we write that out in words? Do we just use words to say the number I'm saying? Yeah, so don't make this too hard, okay? So, use words to describe the fraction. Eli's baseball cards are 5 hundredths of his collection. All right, so we wrote it out in words. Now number 11 is going to be really hard, guys, but they now want you to actually write it as a fraction. Can we do it?
Yes.
I think we can. I already wrote it up. We've talked about it so much. I think we know the fraction. 5 hundredths. Just go ahead and write it again. Okay, now number 12, explain how you can write a decimal in hundredths as a fraction. I kind of don't think we need to write this down. I think we've had a really good discussion about all of this. So you can just do one of these through there, okay? All right, down below, we have 13 and 14. We're going to practice together really quickly. So everyone ready? We need to write 9 tenths as a fraction and in words. Okay, so let's start with words. 9 tenths. Are you just basically going to write down the words that I just spoke to you?
Yes.
Yes. All right, so 9 tenths. They just really want to make sure you understand that thing, okay? So 9/10. Okay, and when you read it out loud, you should be able to picture in your head what that fraction would look like. How do I write the fraction 9/10? What's in my numerator, what's in my denominator? Noah?
9/10.
9 on the top, 10 on the bottom? It's really that simple.
9/10.
9/10. All right, we have one final problem. We need to write 89 hundredths in words and as a fraction. I basically already told you how to write it in words, right? I said it out loud. 89 hundredths, okay? So 89, we write that first. 80 hyphen 9, remember that's how we write numbers like that. 89 hundredths. And then go ahead and write that as a fraction. We have 89 out of 100. Okay, decimals will get easier the more you get into it. It's just a new concept. But once you understand how much it's the same as fractions, I just want to see thumbs today. Are we feeling, thumbs today mean you feel better than yesterday about decimals. So a sideways means, I don't know. Down means I feel worse than yesterday, and up means I feel better than yesterday. Okay. Most of us feel better than yesterday. Some of us feel about the same. We're not done. We'll keep working, okay? All right. Thank you all at home for joining. Keep working hard. See you soon.